Unfortunately, when he took that oath on March 4th, 1853, he was not the same man he had been when he'd won the election just a few months earlier. Tragedy had stricken his family. On a train from their home state, some say to the inauguration and some say just to a different town, because this was a few months before he was inaugurated, the train on which Pierce, his wife, and their only remaining child, his son Benny, was riding, was derailed, and the car of the train in which they were riding went off the tracks. Only one person died, their son Benny, and tragically, both he and his wife witnessed his horrific death, which would haunt both of them for the rest of their lives. More fair political commentators and historians have acknowledged the fact that Pierce would doubtless have done a much better job as president if he had not lost his son so tragically right before taking office. In his inaugural speech, Pierce referenced his grief-stricken state, saying, "You have summoned me in my weakness. You must sustain me in your strength." On some categories, Pierce was successful as a president. He helped calm tensions with other nations, such as with the British, over some very heated disagreements on the waters surrounding Canada and Canadian territory. It's believed he had hopes of annexing Canada and making it part of the United States, but he managed to show the British that they needed to stop overreaching their bounds on American soil, particularly where it was close to Canada. He also was part of the Gadsden incident, which established the southern border, and it really was during Pierce's presidency that the outline of the continental United States was established as basically what it has been ever since. He tried to make Cuba part of the United States as well, trying to annex it from Spain. This was not so popular a move, with Northerners seeing it as an attempt to get another slave state into the country. He spent a good deal of time appointing his cabinet, making sure he had people to represent every different part of the multifaceted Democratic Party. Some thought he should have used his vice president, William King, as an advisor when doing this, but he didn't do so because King wasn't even in the country at this point. He was in a tropical territory trying to recover from his ill health. He even was inaugurated in a foreign country, making him the only vice president where that happened. He returned to the United States as quickly as possible because he wanted to be at home to convalesce, but he ended up dying about a month after taking the oath of vice president, leaving Franklin Pierce with no vice president for most of his time as president. However, the Pierce cabinet was the first and only presidential cabinet to remain completely the same for the 4 years. Pierce and his administration also helped to establish certain rules of eligibility and effectiveness for holding offices like cabinet rather than being a form of patronage as they had been before, people who were part of the same group or had been supporters. Instead, he tried to elect people who were fit for the jobs. Not to say that every cabinet member before that had not been, but that was an important step in the right direction. Unfortunately, although he tried to be equal, the Northern Democrats quickly started to feel that there were more Southern Democrats in his cabinet and in his administration, and that he was leaning much more favorably toward the South. This wasn't entirely the case because he thought that even the South was a bit extreme. He just wanted to keep equality and balance. But the Northerners saw that, especially since he was a Northerner, by not making a stronger stance against admitting new slave states, he was betraying them. His Secretary of State was Jefferson Davis. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he would be the first and only Confederate president in the Civil War. But he was a good personal friend of Franklin Pierce and a devoted Southerner. So he was very influential, as were some other Southerners, in establishing what would be the territory for this railroad that Pierce was trying to create all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. It was seen as an important part of establishing the new nation. But before they could put this railroad through, they needed to figure out what was happening with the territories, and this led to the greatest problem in Pierce's administration, the Nebraska-Kansas incident of 1854.